Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us on Daybreak right here on Trust TV. Right now it's time for us to take a look at the front pages of the newspapers this morning, and we'll start with Daily Trust newspaper. The major headline on the front page reads, FG under pressure to probe herders killing in Nasarawa. And it comes with riders here that says Macban says it's a war crime, blames Autumn. NBA, NHRC seek compensation for victims' families. My hands are clean, that is according to the Benue governor, and ACF and CM demand investigation. Now, details of that story can be found on page 4. Now, still talking about the Daily Trust newspaper, brain drain, Nigeria may end up without doctors, that is according to the NARD. And Plateau governorship, peace pact, CP storms out of venue. To find out details of that, that's on page 10 of the Daily Trust. FG cautions against phone applications, pledges data privacy. That is on page 6. And at the bottom of the front page there, mixed reactions as CBN extends Naira deadline to February 17th. 1.9 trillion Naira mopped up, and reps reject extension, vow to sign arrest warrant against Emefiele. And towards the top of the front page there, 20 killed in Lagos on road crashes. Details of that on page 23. And get us 2 bikes, foodstuff, kidnappers of Kaduna villagers tell relatives. And after controversy, Buhari visits Kano to commission 8 projects. Details of that can be found on page 6. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
And to this Nigerian newspaper, just beside the masthead, we see hike in electricity tariff unjustifiable, consumers lament. Naira, lawmakers reject CBN's 10-day extension. Say its political gimmick wants Emefiele arrested. CNPP calls on security agents to nab currency hoarders. You can find that story on page 2. Below that, we'll see Serap urges Buhari IGP to probe Obi's Katsina attack. You'll find that story on page 2 as well. And underneath that, container crushes 9 to death in Lagos. And finally, on the bottom of the page, Ikone Abia PDP allots vacant Guba seat to late candidates zone. And that's it for this Nigeria this morning.
All right, next we'll take a look at the Blueprint newspaper, and the major story reads, January 31st deadline on Naira notes. My running back and forth has paid up with extension. That is according to Tinubu. Comes with riders here that says, hails Buhari, CBN on 10-day grace. We have achieved 75% success on currency swap, says Emefiele. Says 900 billion Naira still in circulation. CSO's experts thumb up president. House committee rejects extension, and Moghalu raises concerns for the vulnerable. Details of that can be found on page 6 and 25 of the Blueprint. Nigeria gets lowest credit rating in 17 years on Ways and Means. As another story on the front page of the Blueprint. And FG tasks no-tap board members on 5C principles. And Naseni has developed 150 innovative products. And rampaging gunmen killed 2 soldiers, 6 cops in Enugu Ebonyi attacks. And on the news belt there, with Atiku, I've seen hope for Nigeria, says Bala. SEC urges more investments in commodities sector, and Benue not involved in Nasarawa killing, says Autumn. On page 9, you'll find Sharia Council urges INEC to hold elections same day, and Nigeria lost $6.6 billion to flooding in 2022. That is according to the minister. And right below the nameplate, there are 20 killed in Ondo, Lagos road crashes. FRSC Corps Marshal laments losses, cautions road users. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper.
For First News, ex-Bayelsa Commissioner Iworiso Maxine hails Senator Dixon at 57. Naira redesign, 2.7 trillion Naira kept permanently in people's home. That's according to the CBN governor. Ex-NNPP secretary dumps party, says Kwankwaso lacks capacity to rule Nigeria. Interesting. Also, we see Naira redesign, reps reject extension, threatens CBN governor's arrest. Insists on 6 months deadline, says position of law sacrosanct. Vow to issue Emefiele's arrest warrant on Tuesday. 10-day extension, mere political gimmick to hoodwink Nigerians. Worsen economic, social livelihood, and that's according to Dogwa. Argues policy may frustrate February elections. Why Buhari approved old Naira deadline extension. That's according to Emefiele. Down to other stories. New note will monitor banks' strong rooms, says CBN. Suit seeking to sack Buhari to be delivered today. And also, disappointment is an energizer for me, makes me work harder. That's according to Tinubu. Also, Pirates Confraternity disowned viral video on 2023 presidential candidate. You could get more stories by getting a copy of First Newspaper this morning.
All right, the next newspaper we're looking at is the Nigerian News Direct, and the major story on the front page has it: withdrawal of old Naira notes, fuel scarcity ground Nigerian economy. And has the riders here: commuters, traders suffer as commercial transporters boycott work in Osun. As CBN bows to pressure, extends deadline to February 10th. 10-day extension is inadequate, says CPPE, and extension of validity of old Naira notes is a step in the right direction. Federal Executive Council approves Nigeria Data Protection Bill for transmission to National Assembly, and Nigeria's Energy Transition Plan. State House leads the way for public buildings. And now to election matters. 2023 election probe attacks on Obi stop governors from targeting opposition, Serap tells Buhari. NAFDAC to implement pharmaceutical traceability to combat substandard and falsified medicines. And at the very top of the front page there, Galaxy Backbone to commission Tier 4 Data Center Regional Office, and 5.5 billion naira debt. EcoBank floors Honeywell at Supreme Court. Registration, FG issues deadline to digital money lenders. These are the top stories on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct newspaper.
Consumer goods firms eye export to sidestep FX hurdle. This is the first story at the top of the page of the Business Day newspaper. The big story: Nigeria's oil bid process leaves investors in doubt. Beside that, Nigeria gets lowest credit rating in 17 years. Also, employers tap multi-skilled talent as inflation bites. Also, old notes: CBN wants 900 billion naira deposited before new deadline. And that's the much we can take on the newspaper review this morning, the newspaper headlines rather this morning. We'll go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll be joined by our reviewer. Do stay.
But in a situation where you find that they must look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that.
Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on Trust TV. We're now joined by Dr. Theophilus Abba, the Project Director at Daily Trust Foundation. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you, sir. So first I would like to ask, would like to get your reactions now, because reactions are trailing the extension, first of all, of the, deadline for the depositing of old Naira notes in banks, as well as that of PVC collection. So let's start with the old notes.
Well, I think that the decision that the CBN, or let me say Buhari, has made to extend the date for the deposition of old Naira notes. Well, when I write it, I put it in quotation mark, old in a single quotation mark, because I don't think the currency should say it's an old one. I think that is the right decision, because as at last week, it was quite difficult for a lot of Nigerians to do transactions, because you don't have the new Naira notes, and traders were rejecting what we call the old Naira notes, and there was confusion. And the argument had been that, look, the process of phasing out what you call the old Naira note should be gradual. It's not something that should happen suddenly in such a way that people will lose their money. And if you listen to the House of Reps, they came up with an argument that there's nothing like a Nigerian currency becoming old. That, look, a legal tender, the Nigerian currency as a legal tender is a legal tender. So where you now tag one as old and you see this one is being phased out, it's not proper. And they are saying that you need minimum of 6 months. They are even advocating for 6 months. So it's not like when you are, when you redesign, the naira, you do in such a manner that people lose. That should not be the objective of redesigning the currency, And a lot of things have happened. CBN asked Nigerians who had this naira in their homes to deposit them, in the banks. And I think one of the approaches, which I think was a bit frustrating and discouraging, was this idea of arresting anybody who comes to the bank with a huge sum of money. If you remember initially, EFCC was saying, okay, some persons were found with this, they came to deposit, arrest and not things like that. And I think that may have been frustrated some persons who say, okay, if I go to the bank, I may be arrested. But then, apart from that, there are so many Nigerians, so many communities, that are unbanked. Yes. One of the things we discovered is that the community banking system or microfinance bank is not effective in Nigeria.
How so? How so? So it's not effective, and I'm like, okay, can you?
Yes, because if the community banks were effective, so many rural communities wouldn't have issues. You understand? But now these community banks are not really very effective. Perhaps those who registered them, discovered that look, they wouldn't make as much profit as they would make, if they were running banks in the higher tier of banks.
Yes.
And so they're not committed to it. So if the community banks were effective, it wouldn't be a problem for people in rural areas. Like you had Gandhi just saying that look, our people are in rural areas, they do a lot of cash transaction. If we had good community bank, effective community bank, this cash transaction would not be so. This community people will now be depositing their money in the community banks and withdrawn from community bank, and it will be easier for them. But now there are so many rural communities, like I say, like in my own community, that I come from Olomaboro local government in Kogi State. There is no single bank in the whole of Olomaboro local government, and the only community bank there, I think has since closed shop. So I'm not talking of 1 year, 2 years. For over 5 years now, there has not been any community bank in Okpo, the whole of Olomaboro. So you have to go to Benue State, to withdraw cash, which is a long distance. Then we used to go to Ampa. Then there was a robbery attack sometime last year. Ampa is another local government. Since then, banking activities in Ampa is almost grounded.
So, as much as the CBN is taking this stance and insisting that it's either January 31st and now extended to February 10th, there just might not be that infrastructure that they are thinking that is available for Nigerians to speedily exchange, their old notes for the new notes.
Yes. You see, the infrastructure will not be available. That is the opportunity. You see, the important thing is for this cash to be made available. You understand? If many Nigerians do not want to keep $1 million naira in their homes, you want to be able to go to the ATM, you want to take 10,000 naira, you can get 10,000 naira. But as at Friday, you see, I went to over 10 banks. Over 10 banks, ATM machines were dried up. There was no cash. And you can imagine that kind of frustration. I met a man who was, he had up to 4 or 5 cards. And he tried to withdraw money. He couldn't withdraw. And we said, okay, this is not working now. He said, no, the problem was this. He didn't have fuel in his car. He wanted to buy black market. He needed cash to buy the black market. You understand? And he stood there frustrated. If I had cash on me, I would have given to him. I said, look, please just go and get this black market. And that was the kind of situation we found ourselves. So it's good that this has been extended for 10 days. But we appeal that the CBN, should make this cash available. As at last week, what the banks were saying was this, that CBN used to give them 10% of whatever cash they deposited with the CBN. We don't have any way of verifying whether what they said was true. Oh, no. But then if a bank takes, let's say, 100 million to the CBN, to deposit at the CBN, and he gets 10 million back, of course, that will not be enough for their customers who are coming to collect cash over the counter. Then they need to feed the ATM machines. And you see, people love to do e-transaction, but then there is need for cash. You want to buy water. A typical example, that Friday, I wanted to buy a bottle of water. Sincerely, I couldn't buy. That was the first time I knew that, 100 naira was important. I didn't have 100 naira to buy a bottle of water. I was very thirsty.
But in as much as a lot of people are actually hailing the extension of the few days that were actually tagged on and were added, there's this general belief that Nigerians are very lackadaisical when it comes to keeping to deadlines. And even if you extend this for 6 months or maybe even a year, still there will be some people who will still be left out of it, and there'll still be people who will complain that it needs to be extended.
No, I think the issue is not about people not going to deposit their money. You know, we have to be very clear about it. The issue is that the new Naira notes were not available. You understand? You see, if, for instance, I go to an ATM machine, I want to withdraw 10,000 and I get new Naira notes, why should I spend the old ones? But as at last week, old Naira notes were being dispensed at the ATM machines. You don't have the option of rejecting the old Naira notes. You know, so you see, if you go to, shops, you know, people are frustrated. They say, okay, the new Naira note we cannot get, the old Naira notes we are rejecting. So what do we do? So the onus rests on, the CBN and the banks now to put their house in order. You see, you want us to use the new Naira notes, make them available. That's my own argument. You see, if you don't make these new Naira notes available, you increase the suffering of the people. It's not just about 10 days. It's not just about saying, okay, Buhari is sympathizing with the poor. That's not the issue. The issue is that let us have this new Naira note. I don't have any business with whatever you call the old Naira note if I can access the new Naira note. I don't have a stock of Naira notes in my house. Any Naira I spend, I get from an ATM machine. But I go there, I don't get money.
So, Doctor, now there's this question I want to ask before we move further. So, while Nigerians struggled to access the new Naira notes in the past couple of days, I noticed a lot of us noticed an exponential rise or increase rather in the cost of charges POS operators charge to withdraw this new Naira notes. For example, I went to a POS operator. I need cash. They are not giving the old Naira notes, obviously, and I need the new Naira notes. And I was told that I have to pay upwards of between 200 Naira to 500 Naira. Now, as at yesterday, another experience at ATM spots, there were some people who were charging as much as 100 Naira per 1,000 Naira to withdraw or to have access to this new note. So what this means is, if you're withdrawing 10,000 Naira, you might have to pay 1,000 Naira as charge. And then if you're withdrawing 20,000 Naira, you might have to pay 2,000 Naira as charges for this money. So who do we blame for this?
Well, it's the scarcity that we blame.
But should it be an excuse now to hike the price? Because
No, for this, let me tell you, you see, the ATM operator, those who have access to the new Naira notes, you see, they pass through a lot of trouble to get the new Naira notes. One of them may be that, they have insiders in banks. For instance, if I have a friend in the bank, he knows I'm an ATM operator, as soon as there's cash in the bank, you say, okay, Theophilus, transfer some money to me so that I can get this cash for you, which is, you have to appreciate the person, to start with. Then the fact that, you got that is a rare privilege. I want to maximize it. So you may jack up your charges. You understand? That is one. Then secondly, some have to move from bank to bank. Some have to transfer money from one account to several accounts. Because if you have access to new Naira notes in an ATM machine, you can't withdraw more than 2,000 at times. You can't withdraw more than 5,000 at times. So you now have to transfer the money to several accounts to be able to several bank accounts to be able to use various ATM machines to withdraw. That is a lot of effort. And sincerely, if you make so much effort, you have to profit from it. So I don't blame the operators. I actually blame the system that has not made this currency available.
All right. So let's move slightly away from that. There's this burning issue, and the Daily Trust carried it on as its major story a few days ago. Some herders were actually killed. Some people are saying it's friendly fire. And all that. So there's a call for a probe into these killings. And there's lots of finger pointing. Some people blaming the governors of Benue, some Nasarawa State, and all that. what do you make of this whole entire situation? I mean, like, are we not past this era of friendly fire when it comes to situations like this?
Actually, it is very, very unfortunate. But when I read that story that, I mean, some innocent persons were killed, and it's the government's own, Air Force, that carried out the operation, I was shocked. In fact, I said, how can this continue to happen in Nigeria? The fact is that since this war on terror began, many Nigerians have been killed maybe hundreds now. I think there was a data that Daily Trust published about those who have been killed, from whatever we call the friendly fire over the years. A lot of Nigerians, from what has happened in the northeast to north central, there were even in Kaduna, there were times people say we asked the military to come and help us, and then what we now discovered was that they were bombing our own locations, saying, look, they were targeting bandits. They were killing our people. So it has happened several times. There is this one that happened in Yobe State. I think Daily Trust even investigated a year after. There's a Buhari community in Yobe State, about 40-something persons were affected. It was something like that, a Nigerian Air Force bombing the community. And you see, this thing needs to be investigated, and the government, the military needs to come clean, because most times when these things happen, we are told that the bandits or the criminals or the terrorists, were believed to live in those communities. Maybe they embedded themselves in that society. So when these bombings take place, innocent persons are killed. But this is the era of precision warfare, is that not? Where, the Americans will say, want to target so and so location, they get a building, they get the individual, they use, this is the era of precision warfare. So we cannot continue to give excuses to say, oh, we thought that was where the criminals were. We thought that the criminals were there, they used these guys as body shields and all this and all that. We should go past that. So I'm calling for, I'm advocating for a thorough investigation.
Okay.
Because how was the decision to bomb that location taken? What intelligence did they have? How credible was that intelligence? Was there any way of verifying if it is a tip-off? Was there any way of verifying it to know whether what was said was true? You understand? Because if you don't have, even if you are working by intelligence, there are other ways of confirming. What we know about, using intelligence to carry out action is that when Mr. A gives you information, you find somebody to corroborate, to say, yes, what Mr. A said is true, or is probably true. Give me some minutes, I will verify. You understand? But if you work on a single intelligence information, you can get it wrong. And we have seen it severally. Where people will raise alarm, they will call the military and say, look, we are under attack. And then the military will say, oh, let's go there and rescue. And while the military, are on their way, they come under attack. So it's even possible that these criminals could call you and ambush you. They will raise the kind of distress call and say, look, we're in trouble. You didn't know that it's the criminals that are calling you so that they can ambush you. So you see, there is a need to verify and to corroborate any intelligence that you use in carrying out attacks. And if we discover that was not done in this case, and innocent persons were murdered, then something ought to be done. But I would advocate that there should be a thorough investigation. Not only on this, but on several others. Because all over Nigeria, you see, it has happened so much that people believe that even the military were working, in cahoots with their enemies. That the military came to bomb us when we were complaining that we were under attack. It has happened several times. And this should not be so. Because it creates disunity, it creates disaffection, it creates suspicion, and the fear is that some persons may go and attack the others and another community, thinking that they were behind their woes, which may not be true. So there is need for a thorough, a clean investigation. The military, the government must come clean, Although the Benue State governor has come out openly to say, look, he had no hands in it, you know. But if you do an investigation, you will know whether or not he has hands or not.
All right, Doctor.
Yes,
So just another issue before we wrap up this segment. So the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors are saying Nigeria may end up without doctors, and they said this in reference to the current brain drain syndrome that's been bedeviling the sector for quite a while. How would you react to that? I mean, will it get so bad to the extent that we no longer have doctors?
Well, there was a report that, an investigation that we did recently, was actually based on data. And we look at the level of the movement of medical doctors from Nigeria to other parts of the world. And we noticed that even in some tertiary hospitals in Nigeria, many, what do you call them? Is it specialists? Consultants had to move. Many doctors that people felt, well, this is the one that we rely upon, had to move. I remember it's a particular case in Niger State where the only cancer oncologist, call him oncologist, the only oncologist in that hospital migrated, he left.
Wow.
And so you have many hospitals in Nigeria, you know, where doctors, you know, are just waiting to leave. So they're filling forms, they want to move. And the reason is because the condition of service, sincerely, is not conducive. You see, common electricity in some hospitals, there's no electricity. We are not even talking of modern technology. You see, in every profession, there's advancement. Now, in Nigeria, you are practicing medicine, you know, and you are like somebody who is still doing medicine in the Stone Age, when your peers in other parts of the world are using modern technology. For instance, somebody told me, say, in some parts of the world, if you complain about an ailment, you know, an investigation is conducted. You know, you take your blood sample, take your urine sample, whatever, take it, culture it, do the investigation. Then apart from that investigation, they will now go to another level of investigation. They will match whatever was discovered with drugs, available drugs that can treat that ailment. Then there's this precision that, look, this is the drug that you need to take to deal with this. You understand? Now, recently, my younger brother complained about an ailment. He went to one hospital in Abuja. They gave him a particular drug. And do you know, if it were not by the grace of God, he would have died. Very early in the morning, he called me. I said, brother, I have this. He couldn't even talk. I'm not well. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm not well. He just said, I'm not well. I said, wait for me. I had to drive to that place. Took him to another hospital. When we got to the hospital, we said, okay, this was the drug he took. He said, he shouldn't have taken it. Because this drug is given after thorough investigation. You understand? So he was given this drug and he almost died. They had to drain that drug from his system and give him another one. That is the lack of precision. And so if medical doctors in Nigeria are facing this predicament, you know, it is difficult for them to grow, you know, to meet the standard of their peers in other parts of the world. Then the remuneration is not worth it. The medical doctor, maybe he takes 200,000, and you say, look, if I go to Canada, for instance, I take much, much more. So with under that atmosphere, you know, you see many of them want to go.
All right.
They want to leave this country.
Clearly, a lot needs to be done to be able to make sure that we don't suffer that fate. Well, I think at this point, that's where we wrap up the newspaper review on Daybreak this morning. Dr. Theophilus Abba, thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much.
And we appreciate the insights.
Thank you.
All right. This is still Daybreak on Trust TV. We'll take a short break, and when we return, it will be top of the hour. The show rolls on. Do stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that